This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, our meeting is officially underway, and we are just going to wait one more minute for a couple other people to arrive. I do see we have quite a few people who have already joined in the conversation, so welcome, and there's still more popping in as I speak. So for those of you who missed the introduction, or the housekeeping rules, I should say, just a moment ago, I will reiterate to you a couple of quick points, and then we will get started with our presentation. If you're joining us tonight on the computer, we have a chat box that's available for you to type in your questions or feedback as we go along, because sometimes people forget their questions and we wouldn't want anyone to miss that opportunity. So please feel free to type in the chat box at any point during the presentation. And when we get to Q&A, we will go through them, and we'll also give everyone on the line, both on the computer and calling in tonight, we will give everyone the opportunity to verbally speak with our project team as well. So when we get to that point, I'll ask everyone to just type into the chat box, unmute me, or I have a question I'd like to ask, or whatever you'd like to put, and I will certainly unmute you as we go along, and that way you can speak with our project team. And I'll do the same for those of you who have called in on the telephone. I will let everyone have an opportunity to speak with the team, to ask questions or provide feedback. So that's that. Also, I want to point out that we have the mute feature, and you also have camera control as well on your end. On the bottom of your screen, you should see the mic and the camera buttons. Participating with camera is not required, but it's always nice to see your faces and get to know you as you get to know us, the project team. There's several of us who will remain with our cameras on. Some will turn them on and off, and that's all well and good. Everyone is welcome to do whatever they would like to do as far as participation. But we do ask that you do please keep yourselves muted throughout the conversation as we go along the presentation. And when we get to that Q&A portion, again, I will allow everyone the opportunity to unmute themselves or ask a question. If you prefer to ask your questions in the chat box, you can do so, as I said, throughout the meeting. This meeting is being recorded, and I will go ahead and read off the official memo that came with this project meeting so that everyone knows what we're here for tonight. Somerset County, the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, and the New Jersey Department of Transportation are hosting tonight's online Public Information Center meeting to inform local residents, officials, businesses, and the general public about the local concept development study to determine the appropriate improvements to the Great Road Bridge over Bedens Brook. The purpose of this online Public Information Center meeting is to inform the public of the condition of the bridge and to solicit public input and comment towards the project's purpose and needs statement, which is needed to eventually gain funding for any bridge improvements. This meeting is being conducted in conformance with federal and state regulations. The public has been invited and encouraged to comment on this study, and this meeting is open to all members of the public. Written comments for this particular phase of the project will be accepted through the Contact Us page on our project website, which is greatroadbridge.com. And you may comment on the purpose and needs statement through April 30th. We'll get into that at the end of the presentation. And your comments may be also mailed, which we will provide that as well, and you can also email them. So there's many ways for you to provide comment to the team. With that, we are just about ready to start our formal presentation, so I'm going to turn it over to Rick. Rick, please take it away.
Thanks, Nicole. And thank you for everybody who's on the call. We appreciate your time. As you may have heard from me earlier on, the intent of tonight's call is really just that, is to get feedback from the public, the folks that actually use this structure and use County Route 601. You'll hear that theme kind of throughout this presentation. It's very critical. It's part of not only the local concept development study, but also the NEPA environmental process, which we have to comply with as well. But I do want to thank you again for participating. Your input is vital. So with that, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what we're going to talk about tonight. A little bit about the actual local concept development process and the environmental process, kind of where we're at in the project, and we're very early on in the life of this project, but bring you up to speed on what we have done so far, who we have spoken to previously. We've met with local officials in the similar type of format, and as well with stakeholders who are essentially folks that live within the immediate proximity abutting the bridge site itself. You heard Nicole talk about a purpose and need. That's critical to this process, and I'll get into that a little bit more so you can understand where that fits with everything. And then we'll kind of discuss where we're going after this, because this is the initial phase of the project. This will not be the only time that you will see us or be allowed to provide feedback on this project. It continues. This public involvement action plan that we have established follows this project or stays with the project throughout its life. So we'll just bring you up to speed on where we were going and the next time we will meet. As Nicole said, you know, I'm with Dewberry Engineers. I'm the project manager for this job. We were selected to advance the study phase of the project by the NJTPA in association with Somerset County and NJDOT, as well as staff from Dewberry who are working on this job. We also have 4 sub-consultants. Nicole, who you heard from, is with Stokes. Nicole has helped us to establish our public involvement action plan, make sure we are in compliance with the requirements of this project, that the process that NJTPA follows, the process that NJDOT follows, and Somerset County follows. We also have Malik and Shearer on. Malik and Shearer was brought on to help us with physically gathering data at the site through field survey and reaching out to the utility owners in the area. At the project outset, we were also concerned about the physical condition of the structure, so we brought on a specialty sub-consultant, AID, because we wanted to assess the condition of the concrete on the bridge itself. And in addition to that, we brought on TechniQuest to assist us with some traffic data collection. So a little bit about the LCD process. Every year, NJTPA solicits projects from counties, the sponsors that they have the ability to provide funding to, federal funding, through NJTPA in their local capital project delivery program. And part of that is the local concept development program, which this bridge is being funded through. Somerset County, recognizing the condition of the structure and its role within the region, as I'm sure a lot of you know, the county has had to make repairs to it, most recently in 2018, and they realized that they wanted to get this project studied, get this bridge studied, so that they could address the bridge kind of once and for all, get it restored. As I mentioned, the key factor or feature of both the NJTPA's local concept development, DOTs, and the NEPA process is public input and agency collaboration. That's why we're here. We're really very early on in the life of this project. We're at the first phases, literally, on the concept development phase. And really what we're doing in this phase is we're gathering information. So we're gathering physical data about the bridge, its physical condition, the conditions, its environmental setting, if you will, that information, so that we can then evaluate alternatives that address those conditions, those physical issues, as well as making sure that we balance and mitigate, if you will, any impacts to the surrounding environment. Obviously, soliciting input and getting input from those individuals and groups that use the bridge is critical. And that's also, again, why we're here tonight, because at the end of this study, we want to make sure that we've gathered the appropriate information, we've vetted different alternatives that are viable, number one, and that we've got public participation and public support for the project, so that ultimately when the project graduates from this phase and then proceeds into the subsequent phases shown here, local preliminary engineering, final design, and ultimately to construction, that we've got a preferred alternative that has public support and that there's no fatal flaws, so that when we leave this phase and the project graduates to the next phase, we don't have to reinvent the wheel and we don't have to go backwards because we missed something. So this phase is very critical. With that said, from a schedule standpoint, as I said, although we're at the beginning phase of the project, our goal and our responsibility is to deliver the report that will summarize our investigations by the end of this year to the county. The county would then be able to graduate the project to the next 2 phases. Each of those phases can take anywhere from 1.5 years to 2 years, and it's all based on funding. The presumption is that it's funding. If the project is funded, that's the time frame you're looking for each one of those next 2 phases, and then construction, before construction would even begin. So if we're done with our report at the end of this year and you apply 2 more years to the local preliminary and final design, we're not looking at construction until 6 years from now or so, 5 to 6 years. So the projects do take time, but that's why it's important that when we leave this phase, we've got public support and public input. Just to give you another idea of where we're at in the flow chart of this portion of the project, as I mentioned, we're out gathering data. So, and part of that data is community outreach, community input into, how is the project being used? How's the bridge used? What is the purpose of the project, and what are the needs associated? What are the goals we want established along those lines? We gather that information. As I said, we use that so that we can evaluate different alternatives, come up with a recommended alternative, and then we will be back to present that recommendation to you and the options that we vetted so that you can, again, be fully cognizant of the process. I mentioned that the job is through NJTPA, it is federally funded, so therefore it does or must comply with NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act, which means that we must account for and mitigate impacts to environmental resources at the project site. And again, as I mentioned, the critical factor in NEPA, a critical factor is making sure that we reach out to the public and get your input. But let's talk about the project at hand. I won't go into a great detail. I know that probably everybody on this call knows the bridge site. You may not have seen it from the side. You may have just driven over it, but if nothing more, we'll give you a little bit of an overview of the project site. So with that said, Rate Road or 601 is a major north-south corridor. We are studying the bridge that crosses Bedens Brook. Okay, so we're about halfway between Cherry Valley Road, as you can see here, and Georgetown Franklin Turnpike. The Great Road is obviously a major thoroughfare. It's a huge alternative to 206. I know a lot of people use it to bypass 206, and therefore it carries a lot of traffic. As you can see on the aerial photo, the west side of the project site is dominated by residential communities associated with Cherry Valley Country Club, the Homeowners Association, and obviously Bedens Brook Club. Whereas on the east side, it's more dominated by private ownership of farm-like settings. If we zoom in a little bit more now, I've kind of reoriented you in the aerial photo. I apologize. In the aerial photo, we're looking north here in the view, and when I take it to this next blow up of the site, I've reoriented you. So north is to the left. Again, on the west side, we're dealing with a lot of heavy residential community on the west side, whereas on the east side, it's more of a farm-like setting. Again, the bridge site is really dominated by Bedens Brook and its abutting property. So, as I mentioned earlier, the environmental conditions will be critical to be assessed here. The bridge itself was built in 1983. 3. So it unfortunately is only about 38 years old. And that's really what's driving this, is that, today's day and age, as bridge engineers, we strive to get 75 to 100-year life expectancies out of our bridges, so that we can minimize the amount of time we have to go back and do repairs, so that we minimize disruption to the traveling public. This bridge is only 38 years old from when it was originally built. Since that time, the county has also done a major rehab in 2008. So again, 13 years ago, they came in and did major repairs to the bridge deck itself. And then subsequently, again in 2018, as recent as 2018, 2019, they had to come back and do repairs to the structural steel and some repairs to the substructure. So that's really why we're here tonight. The county does not want to have to continue going back to repair the structure. They want to get it taken care of, so that we don't have to do this again and inconvenience folks that are using this project and using this bridge. The bridge carries Grade Road 601, as we mentioned. The road itself is classified as an urban collector. It's got a 45-mile-per-hour speed limit. So there is a lot of traffic using it, and its speeds are fairly high. But again, you do have a rural setting here, so that, and a very tangent alignment. So it's really not a question of whether there's histories of accidents here or anything along those lines. It's purely being driven by the condition of the bridge. The bridge provides a 30-foot roadway, which is consistent with the approaches, 12-foot lane in each direction, and a narrow 3-foot shoulder across the bridge. And as you can see, there's no sidewalks on either side. As I mentioned, part of the data collection, that in addition to gathering data about the physical condition of the structure, we also want to make sure that we gather information about the setting that the bridge is within. And as I mentioned earlier, the site is dominated by Bedens Brook and its abutting wetlands. Just a couple photos here of the setting. As you can see, we've got wetlands surrounding the project, and that wetlands provides potential habitat for T&E species, or threatened and endangered species, which I'll show you a slide in a second that kind of highlights that a little bit better. But in addition to the physical attributes of the environment, we also look at the cultural resources or cultural sensitivity of the site as well. So we'll look at the bridge itself as whether or not it's historic. Is there anything about the structure? Was it built by a famous person? Was it associated with a famous development? Things along those lines. Given the age of the structure, it's 38 years old, it's newer construction. The bridge itself is not eligible for any listing on national or even the state register. And there are no known sites within the immediate proximity of the bridge. So the cultural side is less of a concern from environment here. What's driving the environmental constraints here is purely Bedens Brook and its associated environmental setting, its wetlands and its habitats. So with that said, what we're showing you here is purely what we call an environmental constraints map. Everything that's shown here we get directly from NJDPA's, New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection's website, a database that they collect on sites throughout the state, obviously. And again, you can see what this really shows is that while the bridge is shown in the center of the display here, you can see how the rest of the area around the bridge is dominated again by area that's associated with Bedens Brook, with the brook. Everything that's shown primarily here is wetlands and the floodway of the brook again. So again, we want to make sure that not only are we addressing physical conditions, we've got to make sure that part of that physical condition is environmental. You'll also see these little symbols for, for birds and such, and that's basically to notify us that there is the potential, and it's been recognized, that potential habitat for certain species. A couple quick photos, just looking from the bridge, looking south. Again, you can see the tangent alignment. Looking north, again, tangent alignment, straight shot across the bridge. Flight profile increase as we head north on Great Road. In addition to the environmental issues and constraints at the site. You know, the bridge also functions as not only carrying traffic, vehicular traffic, but it also is a link that carries utilities. So it physically carries a gas main on the east fascia. There's area lines on the along the west side of the road, which again, as we're looking into alternatives and solutions to maintain traffic, restore the structural integrity of this bridge, we have to be cognizant of these utilities as well, so that we accommodate those utilities for the owners and for the benefit of the public. There's also a water line that extends down the the west side of the road as well. In addition to that, through some of the outreach that we've already had with Montgomery Township, we know that the township is proposing an extension of their current sanitary sewer system and is proposing a new sanitary line which will run along the same side of the road as the gas line, so it'll be running along the east side. So we've already reached out and spoken to the township regarding that, as well as their consultant, so that we're aware of what we'll communicate with them, what's planned, and we make sure that that's accommodated in this project. Again, so what's driving the condition of the bridge is just that. It's poor condition. That's why we're here, and that's why I mentioned the county proposed this project for funding and studying. The bridge is classified as structurally deficient. Now, every 2 years, the county is required to inspect their bridges. Just because it's identified as structurally deficient does not mean that it's unsafe to be carrying traffic. That's not the case at all. In fact, what this is telling us is that one of the main physical structural components, in this particular instance, these photos clearly show the steel girders that are supporting the bridge. It's the physical condition of those elements that's driving this project. That superstructure rating is 4, which means that it's in poor condition, and that is why we're here. In addition to that, the substructure is in relatively better condition, good condition, but given the way the structure was originally configured and originally built, we had some concern with the condition of the foundations and the substructure, the concrete elements that you see here. The condition arose because the original bridge, was built with an open grate deck. So any water and any de-icing chemicals and such that were passed onto the bridge or carried onto the bridge by vehicles literally came right through the deck and was able to saturate the steel stringers. That over time, as you can imagine, anytime you expose steel to de-icing chemicals and weather, you're going to get rusting. And that's exactly what's driving the physical degradation of this bridge. And it has prompted these earlier repairs that the county has made. Now, in 2013, as I mentioned, 2008, 13 years ago, they did do some repairs to the deck to try and close that deck up. But a lot of the damage was already done. So that's why they've had to go back and make these recurring repairs to the steel members. And then the most recent one, they made some more repairs to the steel members as well as the concrete. And these photos basically are showing you what was driving those repairs. As you can see here, the stringers themselves are heavily rusted. It actually had portions of the stringers that you would have holes directly through these main members, which carry the loads of the vehicles that are crossing the structure. That's why the county has been out here. Similarly, they had issues with the substructure's concrete, these concrete elements here that support the superstructure. They were also exhibiting typical repair or typical deterioration that we see from concrete that's exposed to de-icing chemicals and just the environment in general, cracks, falls. And so the county has had to go back and make those repairs as well, which they've done. Again, just a couple more photos to show you the typical issues that this bridge is facing. That's why the county has had to go back. And they're trying to study this now so that they can resolve all these issues and not have to go back for the next 50 to 75 years or 100. With that said, as I mentioned, we're here today because we have gone out and collected data. We've started the evaluation of some of that information. As I mentioned earlier, we had also developed a public involvement action plan with Nicole's help from Stokes' side so that we could, in fact, make sure that as this project advances, we maintain that connection with the public. We've had meetings with local officials to get their initial feedback. That's how we learned about Montgomery Township installing the sanitary sewer main. We want to make sure that they're obviously aware of what's going on for obvious reasons. Similarly, we've met with community stakeholders or people who immediately abutted the project site so that we could get their initial feedback and input, and that's why we're here again tonight. So you heard a little bit about purpose and need. So one of the things that we use to develop that purpose and need is the information that we've gathered from the folks who we've spoken to already. As you can imagine, from the first meeting we heard with the meeting with local officials, they're concerned with obviously, please don't close the road for a long term. The county's had to come back, as I said, a couple times. We realized that no one wants to be subjected to detours so that these bridge work can be done, which needs to be done. But that was primary concern. You know, if you can stage the work, please do that. As I mentioned, they also wanted us to make sure that we accommodated the future sanitary force main that's proposed along the east side. And there was also a desire to incorporate or accommodate a future sidewalk on the bridge, at least one. Now, that doesn't mean that at the conclusion of the construction, there has to be a sidewalk on the bridge or along the approach roadway, but they would like it to be where if in the future sidewalks were desired, that this bridge would be able to accommodate a sidewalk without having to come back and redo work on the bridge. We also met with stakeholders. Again, the immediate proximity owners of property, and they kind of echoed that same concern that the township did with regard to long-term closures. Please avoid long-term closures of the bridge if at all possible, and Great Road. And expressed some more concern about if sidewalks are introduced, does that introduce some concerns about safety because of the speed on the road and things along those lines. So again, that's why one of the main reasons we want to get feedback from everybody is, you know, are people walking here? Is there a need for a sidewalk? Those types of things. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the project is driven by the poor condition of the bridge. So purpose and need, as Nicole talked about, we use the purpose and need to develop a set of criteria that we would then evaluate any of the alternatives that we arrive at going forward. And we use this purpose and need to see which of those alternatives, first of all, has to satisfy the purpose for the project. And then we will also develop goals, which I'll show you in a second, that have come out of these meetings with the local officials and the public. And we use that to then establish a criteria which we will then weigh these alternatives against. So bridge projects are often very easy to determine the purpose. The purpose of this project is straightforward. Restore the structural integrity of the bridge in compliance with current design standards so that this project restores that capacity, and we're not looking at coming back here in any short term to approach the public about repairs to this structure. The need are the facts that support the purpose. Well, in this particular case, it's very easy for us to show that there is a need for this project utilizing the bridge inspection reports, which the county, again, is required to produce every 2 years. We have those reports. Through that process, that classifies this particular bridge as structurally deficient because of the degradation of the structure itself. And ultimately, if that degradation continued, eventually the county would have to close the road because of that deterioration, would get to the point where it's unsafe to use the structure. That's not where we're at, and that's why the county's starting this so early on in the process, because it does take time to get through the life of the project and ensure that there's funding for these projects. So they realize that they want to get that study done now, get the project into the system, and get the project addressed. So as I mentioned, we also, as part of that purpose and need, we also develop goals so that as we make sure that we answer or address the purpose of the project, the goals that we also incorporate are those that we generate by listening to the public and listening to the local officials. So clearly we heard the concern about minimizing impacts to vehicular, pedestrian, and bicycle traffic during construction. You know, keep the bridge open if at all possible so that we can, again, avoid those detours and such. Clearly, we have to minimize social, economic, environmental impacts. I pointed out the setting of the bridge being in, the confines of Bedens Brook and the potential for threatened and endangered species. Look in to make sure that we accommodate the potential for future sidewalks along Gray Road, one or more, if in fact it makes sense. Montgomery would also, in addition to their desire to have at least one sidewalk or accommodate one sidewalk on the bridge, they also wanted to make sure that we were aware of the future sanitary main that's planned and make sure that the project accommodates that. And clearly our goal as a bridge engineer and as engineers, our goal is to make sure that we develop a solution to this that's economically justified. So those were the goals and objectives that we tacked on as part of this purpose and need. As I mentioned, here's where we're at from a community involvement standpoint. We've already met with local officials, we've met with the stakeholders, as I mentioned, and we're here tonight to hear from what we call the general public. By no means does anyone have any greater say than others. We want to gather all this information so that our next step is to go back, look at these alternatives, and then we will repeat the process. We'll go through those alternatives with local officials, get their initial feedback, repeat that with the stakeholders again, and then we will bring those alternatives back to the general public with the hopes that we have identified a solution that has public support and can graduate this project to the next phases. So that's where we're at. With that, I'll open it up so that we can answer and get your feedback, which again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but that's really why we're here, is to get your questions and concerns that you may have, any questions answered, any concerns expressed and documented.
Great.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick. We have had a couple of great comments and feedback already coming into the chat box. Before we do that, I want to just read over the purpose and need statement for those who are tuned in on the phone who haven't actually seen the information. So if you could just go back to that slide for just a minute so I could read through that, and then we'll go right to the questions. Okay, the project purpose is stated as such: restore the structural integrity of the bridge in compliance with current design standards. The project has two needs. Number one, the bridge is classified as structurally deficient. And two, further deterioration would ultimately require closure of the bridge, severing CR 601, a vital north-south corridor in the regional transportation network. So that is the project's purpose and needs. And the purpose of tonight's meeting, as we've said before, is to confirm those statements. So we're looking for your feedback regarding those statements. And what I'm going to do now is go right to our chat box and go back to some of the points that were made already. So the first one says let's see. The purpose of a new bridge, does the purpose of the new bridge have anything to do with a potential creation of a Highway 206 Princeton bypass similar to what was constructed in Hillsborough? For example, will the bridge be built to potentially handle 4 or more lanes?
This is Rick, obviously. Hold on one second. I apologize if I put my camera off. The purpose of this project is not being driven by capacity of 206, of County Route 601 at all, of Gray Road. I certainly don't want to speak for the county, but what's driving this job is the physical condition of the bridge. It's not being driven by the road being too narrow, inadequate for movement of the amount of volume of traffic. So no, the intent is not to add lanes to County Route 601. The intent here is predominantly just that: restore the structural integrity of the bridge. Lily, I mean, Lily Sue is on for the county. I'm sure Lily could certainly feel free to add to
Yes,
that.
you're correct. Yes, you're correct on that. This project has nothing to do with 206.
Right.
Great, thank you. One of the questions that came in says, have you considered the heavy dump truck traffic going to the quarry? Will a weight restriction be considered?
That's obviously a very common question that people ask. As designers, we have to design to current design standards, which means that we have to design for the current vehicle type that's using the structure. We cannot design for a reduced structure, excuse me, a reduced vehicle, which means that we couldn't go in and say we're only going to design this for passenger vehicles. We have to design to current standards. Posting of roads for restrictions on traffic, if you will, and truck use, I believe defaults to the state directly. Lily could probably weigh in on that as well, but no, we have to design the bridge to accommodate all vehicles, including, normal trucks that are allowed on any roadway. So the new structure, or the rehabilitated structure, will certainly be capable of carrying all vehicle types.
That's correct.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Lily.
Okay, another comment that came in says, the 2+ month closures during both 2008 and late 2019, early 2020 were significant inconveniences, particularly for those of us who are immediate proximity homeowners. Avoiding further road closure unnecessarily should definitely be a top priority. Additionally,
Yep.
sorry, go ahead.
No,
Rick,
I was going to say that. No, that's clearly acknowledged. It has been expressed by, as we mentioned, local officials, as well as the others that we've heard from already. The county's well aware of that. Everyone on this team's well aware of that, and that's part of our responsibility when we're looking at these alternatives. Is, are there ways that we can continue to maintain traffic on 601 safely while the bridge is being restored?
Okay, great. Additionally, another comment says, there are no sidewalks north or south of the bridge. What makes sense? What sense would it make to add a sidewalk to the bridge? Or would the plan be to add a sidewalk along the remainder of Great Road?
What we've heard so far is that, when we first met with local officials, that was one of the initial comments that they provided to us, and it was interpreted in my mind as, be able to accommodate a future sidewalk. This is often done on projects simply because, particularly in bridge projects, because it costs a significant amount of money to do a bridge project, as well as, if you account for the disruption of vehicular traffic, if in fact you were using detours, that obviously no one wants. So the intent is really, if you're going to address the physical condition of the bridge, the request is, please make sure that it's capable of accommodating a sidewalk should that be desired in the future. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we build, or that the county or the Montgomery Township would actually build sidewalks along 601 at this time, or even on the bridge for that matter. The bridge could just be built sufficiently wide enough, should there be a demand in the future, that it's capable of accommodating a sidewalk, so that you don't have to come back again and modify this structure to accommodate sidewalk. It's understood that there's no sidewalk, south of Georgetown Franklin Turnpike. North of that, there is. I assume it was built as part of the improvements associated with the high school, or but at the current time, there's no plans to construct sidewalks that I'm aware of along 601. And again, this project is purely being driven by, please restore the condition of the bridge. get it capable of carrying today's loads. And, you know, if it does make sense to accommodate a sidewalk, do it now. With that said, you know, incorporating or being able to accommodate a sidewalk in the future means that the bridge would be widened, and that helps maintain traffic. So it may in fact be a way to help us maintain traffic and at the same time, you know, meet one of those goals to accommodate sidewalk in the future.
Great. Thank you, Rick. Would you go back to the slide with the LCD study, the 4 phases?
Yes. Yep.
Please. One of the questions that came in is, what is the proposed timing of this project? So I just thought this would be a great visual to talk about how long this phase will take and then talk about the next phases.
Absolutely. I probably didn't spend enough time on that. But as I mentioned, we're in the first silo on the left, the local concept development process. And our responsibility, our goal is to deliver this phase of the project to the county by the end of this year. So we are, as I mentioned, we're gathering data now. We'll use that data and this input that we get to come up with various alternatives that satisfy the purpose and the need and meet as many of those goals that we've kind of established as identified here today. And then we will use a matrix analysis to weigh which of those options offers the most benefit and is the most prudent way to move forward. Then we'll come back and present those again to local officials and stakeholders and public and get feedback on those options, so that the goal is that when we walk away from this phase of the project, we have what's called a preliminary preferred alternative, that everyone who's been able to weigh in or wanted to weigh in or wanted to voice their opinion, that opinion's been brought up, been vetted, and we have an alternative that has public support and first of all meets the purpose and need, and then has public support so that it can graduate from this phase to the next phase. Okay, so as I mentioned, our goal is to be done with this concept development phase where we deliver a report by the end of this year, documenting the results of this investigation, our study. Then at that time, the county would, once the project graduates to local preliminary engineering, the county would then go back to NJTPA and solicit more funds, most likely, for the next phases, the design phases, preliminary engineering, and then final design. So these are dependent upon the environmental impact of the project, the need for acquisition of right-of-way, utility accommodations, the permits that are necessary will drive the duration of those phases. But in general terms, those 2 phases would each take roughly 2 years. By the time the county is able to get a proposal prepared for the next phases, get that vetted, select firms or a firm, excuse me, to advance the projects into the next phases, you're looking at probably 4 years before we get to the potential to start construction. Okay, so we're done at 2021, add 4 years to that, that's 2025. So construction will not start until at earliest, at the best case, 2026.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
And as one more thing I just want to point out, so the public involvement action plan that gets developed for this project continues throughout the life of the job. So in each of these phases, the public is kept in the loop. Local officials are kept in the loop. And that's the whole premise of the public involvement action plan. It gets set and established at the beginning of the job and carries all the way through, even through the construction phase, so that nothing's done in a vacuum, if you will. Sorry, Nicole.
No, that's great. Thank you, Rick. Okay, another great question is, given the size of the bridge, how could you minimize impacts to traffic?
Well, right now, as you know, it carries a single lane in each direction and it's only 30 feet wide. So, but we will look at all different types of alternatives. Now, we had held off on gathering some of the traffic data physically gathering that, the amount of traffic using volume, using Great 601, simply because of the pandemic. We felt that, prior, when we first started the job, had we gone out and gathered traffic, I think everybody known the traffic would have been very light. And, people, there may be a concern about, well, you could detour this traffic because it's very light. Our responsibility is to look at the entire gamut, if you will, of alternatives. So we first look at the structure from a restoration standpoint. Can we restore it, or does it need to be completely replaced? That's why we also went out and got some testing done on the concrete, the substructure, to see whether that retaining that substructure and reusing it makes sense or not. Or do we need to completely replace this bridge, which all of these affect the duration of the job. And the longer we have to do the work, or more work to do, the longer in general it is. We also look at how much traffic are we carrying? Is there a dominant direction of traffic? Can we alternate traffic so that we can maintain this link open so that we're not diverting people from their daily routine or diverting them on a detour? So we look at everything. So it's really, we look at various options. As I mentioned, one of them being, okay, was a request to incorporate sidewalk. Well, by incorporating sidewalk, that means the bridge will automatically be wider than it is today, which helps because then we have more area to divert traffic to allow us to then maybe stage the work to keep traffic open throughout construction. So we will look at all of these. At the same time, the roadway is tangent. So for us to say we're going to build a new bridge adjacent to this adjacent one, simply to bypass the existing structure so that we can build around it, if you will. Now we have to balance impacts to Bedens Brook and the environment. And we'll be introducing a curve into this road, tangent road, which introduces safety concerns. So there's a multitude of things that we look at, and that's where we're going to go back and do. And then we'll be back to present all the pros and cons of everything that we've looked at so that you'll understand the logic, if you will, of how we arrived at what we feel may be the best option.
And that just really, I think you fed right into the next question in line, which was, can the bridge be replaced in sections using half the bridge to maintain traffic during construction? So
that's exactly what we'll look at. We'll also look at, what we call accelerated bridge construction techniques. Was can we build it faster? Can we prefabricate elements off-site? Can we bring those in and minimize that duration of construction? What are our options? We do this on a regular basis. As we live in a heavily developed urban environment. Obviously this site is probably one of the more rural settings. We've done a lot of work in Somerset County, but we also do a lot of work throughout the state. And we're constantly faced by this concern or this issue of, what can you do to minimize the duration of construction? Can you build it faster? Can you minimize these impacts to us so that we don't have to be on detours for a significant amount of time? So we look at all those factors. Just as a primary example of that, one of the projects that we recently worked with Somerset County on Great Road further north was a smaller culvert structure, which the county realized that they wanted to get that job done with a minimum impact to everyone using 601. And that project was done over weekends to minimize the amount of time that 601 is closed. So the county's well aware of the concern and takes that into concern on all their projects. And, that's again what we'll do on this one.
Okay. Another question that came in is there going to be coordination with Mercer County into which the roads feed?
Yes, we don't necessarily bring Mercer County. We don't bring them into this directly right now because the bridge is located in Somerset County. So again, depending on what solutions we arrive at, what again makes the most sense after we go through these alternatives analysis, the outcome of that may in fact be, okay, could this project ultimately have any impact on Mercer County's flow of traffic? And at that point, then certainly the county would reach out, Somerset County would reach out to Mercer and let them know what's going on. And throughout, again, through the life of this project, all of that will be conveyed. You know, we start kind of local, if you will, and then kind of grow. So if there was any diversion of traffic, that there was any concern about it impacting further south on into Mercer County, that would be addressed and be brought to the attention of Mercer County and discussed with Mercer County. But again, our goal is to not impact traffic.
Great. Thank you, Rick. And I know we haven't gotten into the actual designs yet, and we talked about a little bit about that already, talking about coming up with some ideas and then presenting them later on in the study. But one of the questions is, will the shoulders be widened through the bridge section?
Well, right now, as I mentioned earlier, the roadway is classified as a major collector. And what that means from an engineering standpoint is, depending on how the roads are classified, is what they're required to carry from a design standpoint. In other words, we would look into just that. What's the width of the lanes based on the current design criteria? How wide should the lane be? How wide should the shoulder be? For this particular roadway, the shoulder should be 6 foot. And as a matter of fact, that's exactly what was used further north on the bridge that I had mentioned earlier on 601. So at the very least, the roadway section across this bridge will be widened such that this 15 feet, which represents a 12-foot lane, 3-foot shoulder, this bridge would be increased so that it would be a 12-foot lane, 6-foot shoulder at a minimum. And then if we're talking about adding a sidewalk, minimum desired sidewalk width is 6 feet. So in essence, yes, not in essence, the shoulders in the immediate proximity of the bridge would be widened. And then we would transition back to existing conditions. Because again, the focus is restore the bridge, not construct improvements all the way along Great Road.
Mm-hmm. And in those options and things that we're going to be coming up with later in the project, later in the year, one of the questions is a no additional near-term repair one of the alternatives being considered?
Well, I mean, the county has gone out as recently as, I believe, 2018, 2019 was the last set of plans that we saw for repairs was dated 2018. Literally have a better handle on when those repairs were actually performed. But again, the whole premise of this project is to address this bridge once and for all so that the county does not have to continue to do closures to implement the necessary repairs. The repairs that the county made were necessary because, as I showed you some of those photos of the steel stringers, these are the main elements that support the roadway. There's several of them, but if you get significant deterioration through several of these and it gets localized, then the county may have to say, you know what, we have to close part of this bridge off. Or ultimately, depending on where those loads are, we may have to close the bridge entirely. So that's why we're here. The county recognizes that this bridge is a problem for them. They don't want to keep spending maintenance money on a project, especially on a bridge that's been only 38 years old, and they want to get it restored. So that's the goal, is to get it restored so that 7,500 years from now is the next time you really have to go back and worry about, does this bridge warrant replacement?
Great, thank you, Rick. Another question that came in is the purpose at all associated with any state, county, or local plans to regrade or revise the Great Road from between the ingress and egress of Innsbrook? In other words, deal with the steep and straight grade of the Great Road that resulted in so much flooding recently.
Again, we've been brought on to study this bridge. To my knowledge, I'd have to pass that question on to Lily. I think that I'm not aware of any major project improvements proposed along Great Road. One of the things I can say is with regard to bridge projects, one of the criteria that we are faced with from a permitting standpoint is that pre and post conditions. In other words, the conditions today from the standpoint of how much flow is passed beneath this structure along, within the watercourse, within Bedens Brook, and how much is not passed by that structure, how much, in other words, floods today, has to be, pre and post conditions have to be essentially the same. In other words, by permit, we're not allowed to open up, let's say, make this span larger, raise this road significantly, and therefore pass more water during storm events downstream. Because then in essence, you're moving, if property currently floods today, for lack of a better word, you're just moving that problem downstream. So the permit criteria is such that we are allowed to make improvements to the crossing, but we're not allowed to radically increase flows upstream, downstream, and we're not allowed to radically impose restrictions by the structure that it would in fact cause upstream flooding. So again, the project is driven by the condition of the bridge, fix the physical condition of the bridge, minimize impacts to traffic, minimize impacts to the surrounding environment. So that's what's driving the project.
And I wanted to also point out, because I remember when we had our stakeholders meeting, one of the stakeholders mentioned that it was pronounced Bedens Brook, and we've
Yes.
continually said it wrong. So we apologize to everyone. We always think Bedens because there's only one E in there. So sorry to everyone that we keep saying Bedens Brook incorrectly.
Well, I'm very guilty. I have worked on I've worked on 2 other bridge projects for Somerset County that cross this same stream, and I've been guilty of calling it that for several years. So I'm also from Massachusetts, so my accent, maybe it's just my accent.
That's true. That is true. Any additional comment on that, Lily, or anyone regarding that road? Okay.
Yes, so in order for us to proceed with this project, whether rehabilitation or replacement, we will need to get NJDEP's permit approval. And as Rick mentioned earlier, DEP will not allow us to change the stream flow from downstream, upstream to downstream. It will have to be the same condition now. And when we finish the project, it will have to be the same. So we cannot change the flow at all. So I guess with that said, the profile, changing the profile of Gray Road, we will not be able to do.
Right. There won't be, I guess what I should say, Lily, there won't be significant changes to the profile.
Yes. I mean, we could do minor, tweaks.
Right.
But not significant, raising the road or lowering the road.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And one of the last questions is, why not open Province Line Road to move some of the traffic load off of 601? But I think we kind of covered that this particular project is just specific to the bridge itself, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I would imagine that the folks who live on Province Line Road, which again, Province Line Road is not the same classification as 601. 601 is really a main thoroughfare from Princeton North up into Hillsborough. Province Line is a county road. but it's much more, I'm trying to describe it properly. It's more residential. It's more, it's just not your main corridor, if you will.
Okay. All right, so we have gone through all of the questions in the chat box, and now I'd like to open it up to anyone who is joining us via phone or computer. If you'd like to ask a question or provide some feedback tonight, now is your opportunity to have an open discussion with our team. So if you have if you're on the computer and you have a camera, now's the best time to put the camera on and wave to me, and I can call on you right away very easily. Or of course you can type into the chat box still if you'd like, just say unmute me, and that way I can call on you easily that way. We have several guests on the line, more than 20 people are tuned in. So we do want to give everybody a chance to talk. So now is your time. We will wait for some of your questions to come in. And while we're waiting, Rick, if you could go ahead and put that last screen up with the contact information.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
And the contact information is going to remain throughout the local concept development phase of this portion. So your questions and additional feedback are going to go to me. I'm the community involvement facilitator, or Lily, who just spoke a moment ago. She's from the county. So one of the two of us will handle your question, and we will respond to you very quickly. Another way to contact us is, again, our website, which is greatroadbridge.com. And there we have a lot of information about the project. If you haven't visited the site already, please do. We have a comment form, which makes it very easy for you to send us a message anytime you'd like. And we also have a community input survey where you can provide additional feedback. Also, if you haven't and you'd like to be considered a project stakeholder and be invited to our next round of stakeholder meetings, the next stakeholder meeting, singular, which will be held prior to the Public Information Center, you can send me an email, or Lily. Again, our contact information is right here on the screen. And if you send us an email and just say, I'd like to be a stakeholder at the next meeting, you will be invited to participate. And those are much more of like a roundtable discussion with the individuals who we have in our stakeholder group. So we're certainly open and willing to hear all of your thoughts and feedback and questions about this project. So with that said, let's see if there are any additional questions that have come in. Okay, I'm not seeing any additional chat box questions, but I know we do have, I believe, at least 2 people who have called in on the phone. I'm going to attempt to unmute. I believe her name was Jessie.
Ma'am,
Jessie,
I'm here.
are you there? Hi,
I'm
Jessie.
still waiting. Yes, we're waiting.
Oh, wonderful. Do you have any comments or questions for the team?
Yeah, I sat through this so I could put in my 2 cents.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm general public. I use the road, but I have had no opportunity to view the plans. I have just going by what I know of the roadway. Has any consideration been given to the proximity of Hobler Park entrance? Is this the brook that runs along the south side of the park?
Well, fortunately, where the limits of this project will be truncated well before we get to the entrance to the park. Just
Okay,
to give you, okay.
Yeah, okay, but so there would be no proximity to the park is too removed from the site to have any bearing whatsoever on the project. Is that what you're telling me?
Correct. We should not be anywhere near the entrance to the park. If the park's all the way up what I'll say is well north of the bridge site, between the bridge site and Georgetown Franklin Turnpike.
No, the park is right there at the bottom of the hill. There's a stream that runs along the side of the park, the south side of the park.
Correct, but our intent would be to, again, we need to minimize impacts to the surrounding environment. So I don't see us impacting the park per se.
Okay, now one of my concerns is northbound on 601, the proximity of the bridge to the entrance to the park. You wouldn't even know there's a park there because you can't even see the sign. You have to get across the bridge and be abreast of the park to even see the sign. And my concern was that the view site as you approach could be improved upon as long as somebody's going to disturb the surroundings, so we could even know there's a park there as we come north.
Well, again, I first of all, before I forget, I did want to answer your comment about plans. There are really no plans yet. We are still in the early phases of this. The next time we come back, we will have alternatives that we can show you in more plan view, if you will, and some sketches and comments to comment on those types of things. So there's really nothing we could send you today to look at. So
okay.
So you don't. I didn't want you to think that you had missed something that we did not provide. So that's not the case. I hate to say all the time, I don't want to speak for the county. But Lily is on. I would think that if there's some concern about better signage for entrance to the park, or making sure that it is better identified, I think she could probably take that to either the township or the planning department to maybe have considerations for something along those lines.
I'd like the plans to the bridge to consider the sight line as you come north, because people go right by there, don't even know there's a park.
Mm-hmm.
Because then that's not, it's just the way it is. Nobody pays any attention. And also, as you come north, along that stretch, there's nothing of any particular interest. The only thing of interest is on the east side of the road, right near the bridge. There's a magnificent tree. And I don't think you're going to come anywhere near the tree, but it could be. And I think that tree should be noted and not interfered with, because it's one of the few visual pieces along there that's worth considering.
Rick, if I may add, this is Manuel Vera. Hi everyone. I'm also with Dewberry with Rick. And Jesse, I believe is the name. I just want to clarify what I believe the stream or brook you're mentioning right south of Public Park. It's more of, there's a retention basin on the other side of Great Road that actually drains on the south side of the park. This bridge, which is over Bedens Brook, it's about between half a mile to 3/4 of a mile south.
Oh, okay. Well, that's what I was unable to determine because I haven't seen the plans.
Correct. Right. Yes. So this bridge is about, I think it's like 2/3 of a mile south of the entrance of the park.
Okay.
The stream you're mentioning, yes, there's a little brook right there,
yes.
But that's not it. That is,
okay.
I guess it's just feeding eventually to the Bedens Brook, but it's coming from across the road.
Okay, well that clarifies it nicely. Thank you for your help.
No problem.
Thanks, Manuel. Yeah, as a bridge engineer, we take for granted that as we're crossing them, we know what we're looking at. And like I said, most people probably have unless you golf, may never have seen this bridge from the side, other than seeing, as you drive across, seeing the railings, the 3-bar rail that's on it. So.
Yeah, well, the Historical Society is currently updating its data on bridges in Montgomery. So but your project is going to be a long time after the thing comes out and is completed, but we can make note that you are doing a study.
Correct. Yep.
Any other feedback or questions, Jesse?
No, you've solved my immediate concern. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay. Again, there's still plenty of time for you to provide us with either verbal questions or comments or speak with our team regarding this bridge. And so we welcome you to ask those questions. I'll also point out that one of the questions that was sent to me was regarding the cost of the study, and I pointed out that on our website, which is again on the screen there, and for those calling in, it's greatroadbridge.com. If you go to the project website, we do have an FAQ, or frequently asked questions page, and that question is actually on there. It says, how much will it cost and who will pay for it, meaning the study. And the answer says the cost of the LCD study is funded with federal dollars. There is no estimated cost of the design and construction of the project, since the preliminary preferred alternative, or PPA, has not yet been determined. So we're not there yet.
Nicole?
Yes.
Hi, my name is David Craigseth. I've submitted a couple of questions, and the one thing that stands out to me is that the purpose is only focused on the condition of the bridge. And it seems to me a bridge is just one piece of a larger infrastructure. And it troubles me that we're not getting any information about what the either the local or county infrastructure plans are for which this bridge fits into that. I mean, it's a pretty easy call to say if you've got a bridge that has holes in it, you've got to fix it. But I guess some of my questions were going to, well, how does this fit into, what piece is this part of something bigger? And that's what I'm not feeling like I'm getting. Maybe it is just a small piece of a jigsaw puzzle, and that's all that we're talking about. But if it's part of a bigger vision, infrastructure vision for the county, I'd kind of like to know that and understand where this bridge fits into that bigger infrastructure vision.
Okay, Lily or NJTPA is on as well. We could ask them to provide some feedback on that. Thank you, David.
As far as the county is concerned, this is just purely, we're just purely looking at this bridge. There's nothing connecting to this bridge as a project. We are just looking to bring this bridge back to its intended capacity. Is that, I mean.
Lily, that helps, but is there a county infrastructure strategic plan? Certainly there's been a lot of activity around Hillsborough. And that's, you know, I'm curious, maybe just because this bridge piques my curiosity to understand what the county's strategic plan is in regards to infrastructure, specific roadways.
If there is, I'm not aware of. I don't believe there is. It's just a pure, the condition of the bridge needs our attention.
Again, David, this is Rick Menino. I think, and I'm sure, again, I don't want to speak for Lily. I don't think we have anybody on from Somerset County Planning Group, but the county does have a a county master plan. I don't know all the specifics of it, but they'll even, they have plans for even hike and bike trails and things along those lines through their website. But, what we're talking about tonight, as Lily said, is purely the fact that 601 is a critical road through the county. And the concern is that, if this bridge is not ultimately addressed, that they don't want to sever that link, and have to divert traffic to other roadways, either 206 or, as someone suggested, you can go Province Line. There's obviously multiple side roads, for lack of a better description, that you could use. But the premise here is really, maintain that infrastructure in a state of good repair, and get the structure back to its full capacity from a structural standpoint.
Thanks, Richard.
Yep.
Some of David's question is actually, this is Kevin Tylison. A few of us live on the road. So this is not intended to be a personal question, but I just am curious with the size of the vehicles that come down the road and the speed with which they come, are long-term, are we putting good money after bad if we don't factor in some of those broader questions? And I think David's point, and at least I'd say it is, to try to include some of that so that we have a longer term solution.
I guess, my follow-up question would be, is the concern, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, is it safety because of the speed of the vehicles? Is it one of the things that, was brought again to the forefront was the potential to incorporate it, or to accommodate the potential for a sidewalk in the future. But someone also pointed out, and I've been out there, obviously, the speed on the road is, it's posted for 45. So, traffic can move through there pretty quickly. So do you want to encourage sidewalks or people walking? And again, oftentimes we'll ask, are these bicycle routes? Because, if the road is narrow, even bicyclists don't necessarily feel safe riding their bicycles on bicycle routes. So, but I think that bigger picture that you're trying to get answers for, I apologize that,
Sure.
But I think the planning department would probably be your best resource at Somerset County. Lily, would you agree? I would think they can give you the best overall picture of if there are, I would think, any intended plans for 601, but I'm not aware of any. But that's who I would reach out to.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any improvements like that either.
Yeah, I just one resident's reaction. It'd be pretty hard to have a bike path or sidewalks. You easily have 65-mile-an-hour traffic from large trucks on that road on a regular basis. You've probably seen that.
Yep.
But it certainly sounds like a noble thing to have. But I don't know, that would probably have to take it to, I guess, along the houses to 35 or something like that, But thanks for the input.
Thank you, Kevin. Tony, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. This is Tony Shea. I am an immediate vicinity homeowner. I live basically at that intersection of Inverness and the Great Road, right near the bridge there. And it was mentioned earlier that there had been some communication with immediate vicinity homeowners. I had not been a part of that, not complaining about that. Don't know how that process works, but I would like to be, if there are going to be further discussions with immediate vicinity homeowners, I would like to be involved in that if possible.
Absolutely, Tony. We looked at the 500 feet radius and considered that our immediate sort of section that we were looking at, and perhaps that was not where you're located, but what I can do is I have my contact information here on the screen. I don't know if you've called in. I can certainly read it off to you if you'd like. If you have a pen, you'd like to write it down, or if you want to visit the website, greatroadbridge.com, and send an email through there. I will certainly add you to our stakeholder list so that in the next round, we will include you.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Tony,
Sure.
oh, sorry, go ahead, Nicole. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, I was just going to say my email address is N as in Nicole, Pace, Pace, at Stokes, Stokes, the letters C like cat, G like girl.com. And again, you can go to greatroadbridge.com and fill out the contact form, and that way I will get your message, Tony.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Tony, if I could ask, are you considered part of Cherry Valley Homeowners Association?
Yes, I am.
Okay, because we did reach out to Cherry Valley Homeowners Association Management Office because we realized that there was, as you know, obviously there's a significant residential community on the west side of the road and the bridge, and we wanted, rather than send mailers to everybody in kind of like a shotgun outreach, if you will. And we also applied what the DOT generally applies, which is 500 feet, around the structure. But we realized that the homeowners association would be a good place for us to start. So we reached out to them and asked them if they would also kind of be the point person, if you will, to notify all the residents in the community. So,
Great.
but we're also glad that, because again, at the very least, we now have your contact as well, so that someone actually who lives in the residential community, we can make sure that those are getting out to everybody.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome. Thank you. We've got a few other people still on, and of course, you're welcome to unmute yourselves at this point and speak with our team or ask questions. Deputy Mayor is on. Any questions?
No questions. You've actually answered all the ones I had already. Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, I can also point out that, if at the end of tonight's call, you forgot a question or you're like, oh, I should have asked X, please feel free to do that. You don't have to wait till we are back with you if you want to think of it that way. You can certainly reach out to Lily. You can certainly reach out to Nicole. And then we can, make sure that we get back and answer any questions that do arise or do come up. So you don't have to feel that, oh, I didn't ask my question. Now I've got to wait until the next time we have another one of these meetings. That's certainly not the intent.
That's right. And this website will be up throughout the duration of this phase and beyond. So you can certainly reach us through the contact form at any time. And again, Lily and my email addresses are available for you to submit questions at any point. So if, tomorrow you decide, oh, I forgot I should have asked this. Well, we're always listening. So by all means, reach out. Any other questions? We will wait. Our meeting goes until 8 p.m. So we have plenty of time for additional questions or comments, or if anyone shows up between now and then, we will certainly go through the information. But this video and this recording, I want to point out, will be available on the website, greatroadbridge.com. If you go to the project meetings page, you will find a link there. And again, the comment period towards this phase, the purpose and need section will be through Friday, April 30th. So you will have an opportunity to provide us with your thoughts and feedback regarding that purpose and need statement through the April 30th. After April 30th, we consider the purpose and need complete and confirmed, and then we move on to the next section, which is when we come up with the alternatives. So we will have a second round of meetings later in this year where we will present you, our public, with those concepts. And Rick has brought up to the screen the milestones or the calendar, if you will, of sort of what things look like moving forward. He already talked about some of this. Our local officials meeting will be later this spring, if not summer, maybe. And the stakeholder meeting then in the summer and later on, probably towards even maybe the fall, the Public Information Center #2, which is what we're doing now. And we look to conclude probably towards the very end of the year. And if there are no other questions or comments, we will remain muted unless anyone speaks up. So please do unmute yourselves if you have questions, and we will gladly answer them. Rick, could you put that contact slide up as our final slide while we're, again, waiting for additional feedback, comments, questions, anything like that from any of our attendees who are still on the line or anyone who may join us between now and 8 p.m. Thank you.
Nicole, did Bonnie just join?
Yes. Welcome, Bonnie. Do you have any questions or need us to go over anything from the presentation tonight?
Nicole, can you unmute Bonnie if she's trying to talk? Or does she?
No, I looked.
Okay.
Nope.
But Bonnie, if you are talking, your settings are on mute, and so unfortunately we can't hear you.
But please know that this presentation will be available tomorrow on the website, which is greatroadbridge.com. So you can watch the video recap of it. And you can also note that our comment form will be available for you to provide feedback. And those comments will be received through Friday, April 30th. So there's plenty of time to let us know your thoughts. The time is now 8 p.m. and we will formally close our meeting. We want to thank everyone who participated in tonight's public information meeting. And we also want to point out that comments will be accepted on the purpose and need through Friday, April 30th. And you can also visit our website, which is once again, greatroadbridge.com. So on behalf of our project team, we want to thank everybody for their time and participation in this project, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon. Thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you, Nicole.